All right, here we go. Down to the start to get into the class, right? So this is lecture for chapter one. And this is what's happening. And you'll be watching the lecture, but I'm gonna go here and find the PowerPoint to just walk you through. That's the lecture, right? So I have some PowerPoints and embedded in the PowerPoints are the uh, discussion assignments. So hopefully this thing is going to come up before the end of the day. This has been a problem before. Can't get to. Oh, that's not. So, let's start here. Um, so when you go here, right, this is going to be your thing. You're going to see. Oh, it's not going to happen. You're just going to put your answers in the text box right here for the discussion topic. And I'll go through that again. I'm trying to get this um, document to open up. The problem. For some reason, I don't know why. They're all loaded in the damn thing. Like it shouldn't take this long. All right. Thank you. Sorry about that. It's been a little. So, human sexuality, self, society, and culture, right? This is your uh, textbook. And basically, this is chapter one, the study of human sexuality, right? You'd be amazed at how little study really happened until like maybe 75 years ago or so. Um, Prior to that, it was pretty sketchy. And most of what happened before then has been negated at some level, right? So, we're going to talk a lot about sexual literacy, and I'm going to post a little sexual literacy questionnaire. It's not a quiz, really. For you to learn about yourself. So, I'm going to post that, and you'll see an announcement about it and how to get to it and all of that. Right? So it'll be mixed in with your assignments. So here we go. The historical perspective, clinical history of sexual science. These are our main people. I'm hoping if you're psych students, you heard about Freud. You've taken Psych 1 already, right? So Masters and Johnson, these are little biggies. How we go about the different methodologies for studying sex, which is kind of unusual. The difference, knowing sexual literacy, sexual well being. I'm not going to read these for you. You're going to see all this, right? Um, you can read them at your own pace. But what we do know is knowledge and sexual literacy, which is really skills, leads to a healthy practice. Becoming sexual literate. How do you become sexually literate? And this is all in the textbook, right? That's why I'm not reading this because you've read the textbook too. You can't just survive on the PowerPoints. You need to read the book. PowerPoints are just references for you to go back to, etc., and also to get to the discussion topics, right? The literacy goals for the course, and then here's the first slide about the discussion topic. So there's 10 questions embedded in the slides. You place your answer in the text box on the assignment page, right? So I went back here and I showed you. You're going to click here. And when you do and the assignment's open, you're going to see just a text box right here. And you're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 10, 1 through 10, and just put the answer, type in the answer. That's all you need to do. Okay. Um, so where we are now, I'm going to go back here. So that's how that works. Um, And basically, what's happening here is here's a variety of answers. All right. So here in this case, there's 15 answers for 10 questions. These are the answers. Don't put your own answers in. Don't substitute different phrases or meanings. These are the answers. This is what I'm expecting to see when you fill in the blank. If you write something else in the blank, it's not going to be right. It could actually be right, the meaning could be the same, but these are the terms you need to get familiar with. Uh, One of the things about learning any topic is learning the language, right? So this is the language of human sexuality. So here's all your answers, right? Then here we go. The four elemental fundamentals of achieving sexual well-being, right? Pleasure, protection, focus, and a purpose of life. Emotional literacy, right? The most humans have emotional attachments to sex for the most part. Not every act, right? But that's our thing. That's how human beings we are. We connect, right? Emotionally through sex, and so that's one of the things that we focus on during the class and growing that emotional stability, that emotional knowledge of ourselves and how we operate, make ourselves happy. Um, so there's and a historical perspective. We're going to talk about the history of research a little. Right? So here's your first question. Blank is both a physical state defined by positive, healthy in your body and a subjective or mental state recognized by feeling positive or joyful about you. And one of these back here is the answer, right? So, so you just got to get those answers when you get the question, you write down your answer, and then you go back and put it in that assignment text box. So when we talk about the medical, now the first things we talked about in the first research for sexuality was about the medical model, which was a little bit off the mark, right? Almost everything sexual was some type of deviation from the average, right? Masturbation was considered a serious sexual disease. There was a lot of bias, right? People were prudish, ignorant, and puritanical theories, right, based on religion. When they're talking about puritanical religion, they're basically based in religion. And things evolved, right? We had evolution. Darwin and them found some things, other things going on, right? Uh, then some things happened about fetishism, and this is a later chapter, but right, people have fetishes, they are attracted, they get sexual excitement and satisfaction based on objects other than actual sex act, on our average sex act. Uh, Abnormal sexual symptoms or perversions, right, and fetishisms. Um, then we started studying people in groups. And this gentleman right here founded the homosexual rights movement in Germany, which was quite a while back. Right. And so keep going with sexual research, and then Freud, psychoanalysis. I could be reading my notes, right? Right, Freud's big thing, and most people don't, even especially therapists. I don't know any therapists that are Freudian psychoanalysts really anymore. We deal with things other, but Freud's whole thing was that we repressed ourselves. We had, but he did find out about the erogenous zones and biological bisexuality. He also did that. This thing was about parents. It's all about your parents, right? And we know our parents have a big influence on us, and if you don't, they don't. I always get somebody in the discussion that tells, or somewhere along the line that tells me, "Oh, none of this had an influence on me," and I'm going to tell you that you are absolutely wrong. Like if you want to believe that, it's naive at best, but it's not. It's just not true. Culture, parents, all these things, religion, everything has an influence on you as you're growing up. What you do with that influence is another story. But to say there was no influence is not really. All right, so here's your another couple of other questions. All right, but then we're going to go into this. So Freud, right? He had the Oedipus complex. Uh, we're always we're attracted to our parent of the opposite sex, and to the point that we exclude or are indifferent or mean or whatever to the parent of the same sex. Right? So there's the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex, depending on your gender. Most of that I said doesn't nobody pays attention. Although it doesn't mean it wasn't true, right? It's just doesn't help when we're trying to help people. Um, Field studies, observing behavior. So when did we start like observing people having sex? Hmm. Um, Here we go. Culture is more important than personality or biology, right? Nature versus nurture, and the never-ending topic, right? And Margaret Mead shows that it is nurture that is more important. So Kinsey started doing surveys and getting samples of people and getting information that way. Calderon, Williams, and Masters and Johnson, like these are the people. They observe sexual behavior in the laboratory. Like literally, they got people volunteer to have sex connected to electrodes and all types of things. And they watched and they recorded the body. Like, so would you be willing to do that? They got people to do that, right? And they learned a lot. Right? Like this is how you get excited. This is how the whole sexual cycle is incredible. Uh, we still do a lot of surveys, right? And then when you do research, we talk about random samples, which means basically that everybody gets a chance to be part of this science. Not everybody gets picked, or not everybody gets chosen, but everybody has a chance, the same equal chance of being chosen. So this talks about different practices, oral and anal sex in diverse ethnic groups. Right? I'm not going to review all. You're going to see all this in your reading. Uh, then um, homosexuality causes less frequency than reported by Kinsey. Right? So it may not in DSM-3. I'll date myself a little, which was right at I came into the field at the tail end of that. I was older when I became a therapist, but um, there was the DSM-3 was just getting phased out for the DSM-4, and in the DSM-3, homosexuality was a mental disorder. We've come a long way since then, and that was only in like the 70s, in the 80s, maybe even part of the 80s. By the therapists, people were still viewing it as an illness or a disorder. There's a lot of talk about social justice today. How do we protect people who are not, well, our average person or who we expect them to be? There's a lot of this, right? But we also know, like the sexual studies about pregnancy and infections and all other kind of more questions. Couple more questions. Like I said, they go all the way through the lecture. Um, how do we get? How does the research help us? How do we? What methods do we use? What do we get out of it? The ethics of sexual rights. So, like I said, Masters and Johnson, and ethics in research in general. If you keep going to school, if you're going to write a master's you're going to write a thesis for a master's degree or a dissertation, excuse me, for a PhD, you're going to find out, you're going to do research, and especially with the dissertation, you'll very likely be doing some type of live research where you'll be working directly with people to do some kind of study. Um, and you will find out that the internal review board, what we call the IRB, there's a ton of people watching over you to make sure that your subjects are safe. Because in the past, we have done horrible things to people in the name of research. You don't need to worry about that, I guess, here. And many of you heard about some of that in Psych 1, if I remember correctly. So here's our designs, right? The scientific method, right? We have a hypothesis. We do quantitative surgery, which means I have a scale of some kind of number. I talk a lot about Likert scales, my statistics classes. Um, so when it's quantitative, it means I have some kind of number and everybody gets a score or picks a score or rates something, and then I use that data to do mathematical interpretations of my research. Then, of course, there's qualitative research where I do a survey and I ask some open end questions, and the answers may be yes or no, but more likely they're going to be open ended where I'm going to get some responses, a lot of responses that don't match, basically. Mm. Um, so, you know, part of the thing, objectivity, they need to be objective. I need to be able to generalize. We basically do research with samples, and I want to be able to generalize that to the general population, to the population, right? I have a sample of a population, and I want to be able to generalize that research to the entire population. Things need to be reliable and validated, which means I can do an experiment, and 5 years later, somebody else can do the same experiment, and they're going to come out with this. Couple more questions, same thing, research designs, and I don't know how deep you are, how much in your history told you about research design and all that, but here it is, and I'm always available for questions. If you have questions that come up or you're reading, please feel free to email me. Surveys, how we do surveys, this is all. And then this is the end of your last questions. Participatory action research, right? Collecting information. It reflects on people's experiences, right? This is the whole thing about once you start using people. The other way to do research is to review a bunch of other research and reinterpret it, or use the data from other research to come up with to look at a different perspective. So here I talked about the rights, right? There's universal human rights, right? We have the rights to. I'm not going to read all these; they're in your book, right? So that was it. That's chapter 1. Like I said, the PowerPoints can only brief you. They won't make you successful in the class. You still need to do all the reading, but you need to watch the lectures to do the discussion topics. Okay. Um, so that's the end of chapter 1, and we're going to move on to chapter. I'm going to move on to chapter 2, and you will eventually.